Aaron here, BeltFeds.com. We're back again talking about field modified M60s in Vietnam. The last video that we did on this, we focused on Navy Helicopter Squadron HAL 3 and the modifications that they did to their door guns. And today we're going to talk about another Navy unit that needs no introduction, and that's the U.S. Navy SEALs. Now, there's so many videos and historians that have talked about the Navy SEALs and what their role was in Vietnam. And I don't want to dive too deep into that because there's many people that know much more than me on it. So we're going to focus on the field modifications that they did to their M60s. Of course, the Navy SEALs, they were focused on mission accomplishment in Vietnam. That goes without saying. Their command understood that combat efficiency and mission accomplishment should take priority, and they were given the ability to modify their guns the way that they saw fit. And it wasn't just restricted to their guns. We see a lot of photographs of Navy SEALs in Vietnam wearing blue jeans because they believed they were more durable and better for their mission. So they had that ability to do that. But we won't dive too deep into those details. We want to focus on the M60. So what I have in my hands here is exactly how they set them up. Now, this did vary a bit over the years, but this was kind of the norm for them. And we're going to talk about what these modifications are and why they did them. So let's get this on the bench.
These men are members of one of the most unique military organizations in history. Behind these green faces are men who have accepted the challenge of some of the most daring assignments given to American fighting men. These are the Navy's SEALs.
We have two M60s on the bench here. Both of these are live machine guns. And just before we dive into the differences between these two, I just want to put an emphasis on, I strive to put out the most historically accurate information and depictions of these weapons as you would have seen them in Vietnam. And what I mean by that is everything on these two guns is original U.S. military stuff. Nothing is airsoft, nothing is reproduction. I didn't put scratches on any of this stuff to make it look war-torn. This is how it came out of the military. The paint and the different paint on here, this armorer's tag on this handguard, which is exactly how I got it. We deal in M60 parts. We get a lot of them in. We have for a very long time. And when I get parts in that I recognize as being very old, period correct to Vietnam, I always keep them back, and that's the stuff that I really look for. Like these armors, markings on these buttstocks. Everything you see here was put here by someone in the military. Okay, so just wanted to put an emphasis on that. This is as accurate as it gets as far as what you would expect to see if you were back in the 1960s and 70s. Okay, this gun in the back is a standard issue gun. So if you were an infantry unit, line unit, a security detachment on a fire base, and the Navy SEALs, this is how these guns would have been issued to you, all right? And it was incumbent on the units to do the field modifications. So let's start with the front of these guns here. The most obvious difference in these two is the length, and that all falls to these two barrels here. Both of these barrels started their life out looking exactly the same. And these original barrels are great. They're durable. They can take a lot of abuse, but man, they are heavy. All right. And when you have this big bipod, this solid steel bipod up front, you're adding a lot of extra weight to the front of that gun. The SEALs wanted to make these guns as patrollable as possible, as maneuverable as possible, as short as possible, and as light as possible, because their specific mission, that those aspects outweighed the benefits of having a bipod on the front that you could set the gun up on. These guys were getting in and out fast, and silent and deadly, right? Whatever the term is for the SEALs. So the first thing they wanted to do was get the weight off the front of this gun and lose some serious length on it. So they would have these modified by, I think the term is machinist's mate, correct? They would cut these down. So basically they would just cut these, and the reason they're cut right here is because that's where the end of this gas cylinder goes. So that's where they had to make the cut, thread it, and then they would ditch that bipod, and they would just put this flash hider back on. And one of the modifications that they did a little later on in the war, around 1970, is through finding out through trial and error, is when you cut these back, you have the flash coming out of this suppressor, and it's putting a lot of heat on this gas extension. And depending on the duration of fire, you can really mess this up here. And depending on how hot it gets, it exposes some areas for failure. What the SEALs did a little later on in the war is they had a piece field fabricated that went over this gas extension, and what that did was it served as a barrier to help mitigate the heat that was coming off that. And I'm going to actually cue in a photograph right here of a SEAL with that modification. Now, what we'll do real quick is we'll take this barrel out, and what we'll do is we'll kind of show you a side-by-side of how this compares to a regular issue barrel. So obviously this thing is very short here. I didn't cut this down. When I got this in, it was already cut down. So just a side-by-side here, this can kind of give you an idea of the difference in length on these. And it's, a good, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 inches or so. And most importantly, that's a lot of weight coming off the front of that. A lot of steel removed to include a portion of the barrel and also that bipod that we talked about. All right, let's keep trucking along here, and we'll move back, and we'll talk about just some of the different magazines they use. This is called a magazine bracket or a feed chute mounting bracket. These were on every M60 that was issued in Vietnam for the most part. Towards the end of the war, we might have seen some that didn't have them, but definitely in the early on, these were on these guns. So the Navy SEALs, as we can see in a bunch of these photographs that I'm about to cue in, they put these magazines on the side of their gun. Now, the infantry units and the line units could have got these too, but we didn't see these used a lot by the regular grunts. However, the Navy SEALs used these. They held a 100-round belt inside in this cardboard box, which was how the ammunition was issued. And these are quick attach, so they just quick attach to the side of the gun there. It snaps in using that magazine bracket, and when the ammunition is expelled, you just hit this lever and it pops right off. So, again, we're talking about the specific mission of the Navy SEALs. A lot of the lessons learned in Vietnam from the Navy SEALs put an emphasis on silencing your equipment, okay? Taping sling swivels down. Even when I was in the Marine Corps, we were doing this. And it's all based on lessons learned. And I think, using these ammunition magazines was more effective for them because you didn't have a 100-round belt just kind of dangling in the wind, making noise, slapping against things. Uh, so it just was a more compact and quiet way to execute their missions. We're going to go back here now to the rear end of the gun, and this is another one of the most obvious differences between the two, is this rubber boot. Okay, these rubber boots were unique to the Navy SEALs. They were also unique to the Vietnam War. They were not there in great numbers. You know, some of the Vietnam veterans we talked to from HAL 3, the Navy squadron that supported the SEALs, they always were looking for these rubber boots. And the way they explained it was, it's very hard to find them over there. They could only get them from the Navy SEAls. So these are something that was made in small numbers and unique to the unit. I have an original one here in the box still. Unobtainable. But anyway, you can see it's made in May of 1968. This is how these came here, and we can see it's just in a rubber boot in the box like that. There's the date on it, 1968. That's how they were dated. There's a metal pin that goes through the back of these, and the buffer hooks into that metal pin, and that's how it's held onto the gun. This is a slot for the charging handle to ride in. So, you know, when we talk about M60s in general, a lot of this stuff is so heavy. It's just the way they made it. It's the way this gun was designed in the 1950s. So, you know, it looks like rubber, right? Like this trigger group, it looks like a rubber trigger group. But what it is it's a steel frame and a sheet metal bent frame, and then they coat this in rubber. A lot of weight to it. The butt stocks were really, really heavy, right? The butt stocks were the same thing. You had steel supports on the sides where it sits on the gun. You had a metal frame. You have a big metal butt plate on the back of that with the shoulder rest. And then it's all coated in rubber and riveted together. A lot of weight on there. So these guys wanted to reduce weight. They wanted, again, I'm repeating myself, but they wanted to make this gun shorter, lighter, and more effective for what they specifically were doing. And they got these rubber boots. Now, every one of these that I've seen is dated 1968, and it makes me, I don't believe they made these after the war. I think they were used during Vietnam, and I think after the war, it was just one of those things that kind of went away with as the gun evolved in the 1980s, and they came out, you know, with the M60E3s and the other variations of it. So those are the main differences between these two guns. Let me back this camera out. And look, the role of the SEAL was conducting these high-risk missions, minimal patrol size, and it was an emphasis on get in and out as fast as you can, carry as much ammo as you can, and when you start cutting weight in areas such as the front and the back, and it does help them accomplish their mission. And in some of these pictures, we can really see these guys just, you know, ammunition and water. That's what they took. So those are the main differences between these two guns, and those are the modifications, the field modifications that were done by the SEAL units in Vietnam. Now, they did vary from year to year, and you know, some of them ran slings on these. You're going to have personal differences like that, but and there is some, you know, differences they might have done to the springs inside the gun. But as far as the main differences, when you look at a field modified gun that the SEAL used, these were the main differences, and you can clearly see that in the videos and photos that we're queuing in. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and I appreciate everyone's support.